Your mind is either your greatest asset or your worst enemy. And here's the truth. The thoughts you allow are the seeds you plant, and eventually they bear fruit. If you plant weeds, fear, doubt, worry, don't expect a harvest of peace and prosperity. The soil of the mind doesn't care what you plant, but it will return what you sow. You see, a man doesn't rise to the level of his ambition. He rises or falls to the level of his thinking. If you think small, you act small. If you think defeat, you behave defeated. And if you constantly allow negative thoughts to dwell in your mind unchecked, don't be surprised when your life begins to match your mindset. Most people don't fail because they lack opportunity or resources. They fail because they entertain the wrong dialogue in their heads. That quiet whisper that says, "You can't. You're not enough. Why try?" That whisper becomes a shout if you don't learn to silence it. So today I want to talk to you about killing that voice, not managing it, not negotiating with it, killing it. Because until you do, you'll never be free. And let me promise you, freedom begins the moment you take back control of your own thoughts. Because in the end, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. The battle isn't out there in the world, it's right here between your ears. And if you can win that war, you can win anything. If you want to change your life, you've got to start by changing the way you think. That's where everything begins. Long before the wealth shows up in your bank account, it has to appear in your mind. Before the results come to the surface, they grow deep inside your thinking. You can't plant weeds and expect roses. You can't think failure all day and then wonder why success never arrives at your doorstep. I remember when I first started my journey, broke, discouraged, and drowning in excuses. I blamed the government, I blamed taxes, I blamed my boss, I blamed my circumstances. Until one day a mentor said to me, "The problem with your list is that it's too long." I asked, "What do you mean?" He said, "You've got everybody on your list but you." That moment hit me hard because I realized the real enemy wasn't out there, it was in here, in the mirror. You see, poverty isn't just a lack of money, it's often a lack of vision, a lack of discipline, a lack of belief. And belief is everything. If your mind is trained to expect disappointment, it will find it. If your mind is trained to search for opportunities, it will see them everywhere. The mind is like a lens. You don't see with your eyes, you see through your eyes, but with your thoughts. If your lens is scratched by fear, doubt, and negativity, then everything you look at will seem unclear, hostile, or impossible. The great Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." That's ancient wisdom, and it still holds true. Thoughts are not harmless, they're seeds, and your life is the harvest. Plant worry, and you'll grow anxiety. Plant self-doubt, and you'll grow hesitation. But plant discipline, gratitude, courage, and soon you'll grow a life that feels powerful and worth living. It all begins with awareness. You've got to start listening to the words you say to yourself when no one's around. If your self-talk is filled with, "I can't," "I'll never," or "it always goes wrong for me," then you're programming your subconscious for failure. The subconscious doesn't judge, it just obeys. If you feed it poison, it will serve it back to you in your actions, your decisions, and your results. But if you begin to speak with faith, even before the evidence shows up, you'll begin to shift the tides. When I was in my 20s, I started reading everything I could on success, wealth, and human behavior. Not because I had the money to afford the books, but because I couldn't afford not to change my thinking. I studied Epictetus, Seneca, Emerson, and the Proverbs. I learned that the mind must be trained just like a muscle. If you don't exercise control over it, it gets flabby. Negative thinking creeps in, laziness becomes easy, and pretty soon your whole life reflects that lack of discipline. That's when I began writing down affirmations. Not the kind that just sound pretty, but the kind that challenge your beliefs. I would say things like, "I am responsible for everything I do and everything I become." That's a tough one, but it forced me to stop blaming and start building. I said, "Today I will feed my mind with strength, not weakness." I repeated it enough that my behavior began to match my belief. Look, it's not magic, it's not overnight, but it is transformation. Slowly, you begin to notice you don't react the same way. You don't get pulled into drama. You don't let small people pull you into small thinking. And here's the beauty of it. When you elevate your thinking, you elevate your life. Some people are so used to negative thinking, they wear it like a badge. They say things like, I'm just being realistic. But realism without vision is just pessimism dressed in polite clothing. And pessimism has never built a company, led a movement, or created wealth. You've got to train yourself to imagine a future that's bigger than your past. That's what separates the wealthy from the average. They don't let their circumstances shape their mindset. They let their mindset shape their circumstances. There's a story of two men who were born in the same tough neighborhood. One ended up a drug dealer, the other became a judge. When they were interviewed and asked, why did you become who you became? They both gave the same answer. With a background like mine, how could I have turned out any different? One used his circumstances as a prison, the other as fuel. That's the power of mindset. We live in a world that sells fear, doubt, and drama. Turn on the news. It's crisis after crisis. Scroll through social media. It's comparison and criticism. If you don't take control of what goes into your mind, the world will do it for you. And it won't be positive. That's why you've got to guard the gates. Be selective about what you listen to, who you talk to, and what you dwell on. You wouldn't leave the front door of your house wide open overnight. Don't do it with your mind. And here's something I've learned. The wealthiest people I know aren't just financially rich, they're mentally rich. They invest in ideas. They feed their minds before they feed their body. They talk about growth, not gossip. They think long-term, not just this week. And because they've built their thinking, they've built a life worth living. The mind is your soil. Negative thinking is the weed. If you don't uproot it daily, it'll take over. But if you master your mindset, if you start every day with intention, if you guard your thoughts like treasure, your life will begin to shift in ways you never imagined. Slowly at first, then suddenly. So begin now, not next year, not next month, not Monday, right now. Train your mind, and your future will thank you for it. If mindset is the soil in which your life grows, then positive thinking is the sun that makes it flourish. It shines on every endeavor, brightens your attitude, and feeds your vision. It doesn't mean you walk around ignoring problems. It means you choose to face them with strength instead of surrender. Positive thinking isn't about being naive. It's about being powerful. It's about looking at the facts and still deciding that your response will be filled with belief rather than bitterness. I remember when I was struggling in my early days, working hard, going nowhere. And the worst part wasn't the empty wallet or the long hours. The worst part was waking up each day feeling like I was stuck. I had no idea that the real prison wasn't the lack of money, it was the mindset of lack. I had built mental walls around my own possibilities. Every time an opportunity passed me by, it wasn't because I wasn't capable, it was because I didn't believe I was. That's where positive thinking begins. It's the belief that better is possible, that you can become the person who earns more, does more, contributes more. The great Abraham Lincoln once said, most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. And let me tell you, that's true for success too. Most folks are about as successful as they make up their minds to be. Because once you change the way you look at things, the things you look at start to change. Now, some people say, well, I don't want to get my hopes up. That's a terrible strategy. Get your hopes up. Lift them high. Hope is fuel. Without it, you won't act. And if you don't act, you won't achieve. Positive thinking sets the mental thermostat. If your thermostat is set on fear, you'll freeze every opportunity. If it's set on doubt, you'll sweat through every decision. But if it's set on belief and optimism, the environment inside your mind becomes one that attracts success. I used to carry around a small journal, and every morning I'd write down one thing I was grateful for, one thing I believed about myself, and one thing I was working toward. That habit changed my life, not because the words were magical, but because the repetition reprogrammed my attitude. I started looking for the good instead of expecting the bad. I began entering each room with a smile instead of a sigh. I didn't wait for things to go right to feel right. I made the decision to think right no matter the weather outside. That's another thing. Positive thinking is most valuable when things aren't going your way. When the deal falls through, when the customer says no, when your best effort still isn't enough, that's when most people let negativity win. But positive thinkers say, even this has a purpose. Even this is teaching me something. That mindset doesn't just get you through the storm, it teaches you how to build a shelter and then a mansion right in the middle of it. I once met a man in Ohio who told me, Jim, I've tried being positive and it didn't work. I said, how long did you try it? He said, 2 days. I said, friend, that's not trying, that's visiting. Positive thinking is not an event, it's a practice. It's not something you try when things are nice, it's something you live when things are hard. It's not a decoration, it's a foundation. And here's what I've seen. People who practice positive thinking tend to attract other positive people. And those kinds of people become allies on your journey. They share ideas, they open doors, and they challenge you to grow. On the other hand, spend your days surrounded by complainers and you'll start to believe that life is unfair, the system is rigged, and success is reserved for the lucky. That's not true, but it feels true if that's the language you're surrounded by. So you've got to guard your thinking with more care than you guard your wallet. Your wallet can be refilled, but if your mind gets filled with trash, you'll spend years cleaning it out. Fill it with hope, strategy, and belief, and you do that by choosing your words wisely. Don't say I can't when you really mean I haven't yet. Don't say this is impossible when the truth is this is unfamiliar. Speak life over your goals, not death. When I first began making progress, it wasn't because I suddenly became smarter. It was because I became sure. My thoughts shifted from maybe I can to why not me, and that shift in belief opened doors that had always been there, I just couldn't see them. Positive thinking doesn't make the path appear, it makes you able to walk it. And let me say this, positive thinking isn't ignoring reality, it's about confronting it with courage. The Stoics taught that we must face life head on, but with inner mastery. You acknowledge the mountain, but you also remind yourself that your legs are strong. You don't pretend the storm isn't coming, you build a better boat. I often tell people, talk to yourself more than you listen to yourself. Because your inner voice, left untrained, will replay every fear, every doubt, every insecurity you've ever absorbed. But if you speak positive, intentional thoughts, your brain will begin to align, your emotions will follow, and your actions will catch up. It's a beautiful thing when you go from a life of reaction to a life of creation. When you stop being a thermometer and start being the thermostat. When you stop waiting for better days and become the better day. Positive thinking is not a trick, it's a tool. And it works if you work it. Now here's the test. Tomorrow morning, check your first thoughts. Are they thoughts of dread, fear, or exhaustion? Or are they thoughts of gratitude, strength, and focus? The direction of your day often follows the direction of your first few thoughts. Make them count. In the end, success isn't something you chase, it's something you attract by the person you become. And the person you become is shaped first in your mind. So guard it, train it, and most of all, fill it with the kind of thoughts that turn potential into progress and progress into prosperity. Because positive thinking, consistently applied, unlocks a future that's been waiting on you all along. Life doesn't hand out guarantees, it hands out tests. And how you respond to those tests, that's what builds you or breaks you. I've learned over the years that it's not the load that destroys you, it's the way you carry it. And mental resilience, my friend, is how you learn to carry the weight without letting it crush your spirit. It's the invisible armor you build inside your mind, forged not by comfort, but by challenge. I've met people who had everything going for them, talent, education, opportunity, but the first time life gave them a little heat, they folded like a cheap umbrella in the rain. Why? Because they never learned how to stay standing when the winds of adversity started to blow. On the other hand, I've seen men and women who came from nothing, who were knocked down time and again, but they kept standing back up with fire in their eyes. That fire, that's resilience. You see, resilience doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you don't surrender to it. It means that when life throws a punch, you absorb the blow, learn the lesson, and move forward with deeper resolve. The philosopher Seneca once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." That's the truth. Every hardship you endure is secretly offering you a gift, the gift of inner strength, but only if you choose to unwrap it. Let me tell you about a time early in my career when everything went wrong. I had put together a seminar, rented a venue, printed flyers, made calls. I was excited. I thought, this is the one. But when the day came, only 6 people showed up. I was humiliated. I could have packed up, gone home, and decided that maybe this wasn't for me. But instead, I stood in front of those 6 and gave them the best talk I could possibly give. Because I understood something most don't. How you respond when nobody's clapping is what determines whether the world will ever clap for you. Resilience is a choice. It's choosing not to be defined by what happens to you, but by how you respond. The world loves a fighter, not one who swings recklessly, but one who refuses to back down in the face of pressure. When your business hits a dry spell, when the paycheck doesn't come, when your plans unravel, that's not your cue to quit. That's your moment to rise. And part of mental resilience is being able to focus under pressure. You know, some people get so rattled when something goes wrong that they forget everything they've ever known. They panic, they scatter, but a resilient mind stays sharp. It stays locked in on the outcome. It doesn't get sidetracked by emotion. Emotion is fine, but if it becomes the driver, you'll crash. Control your emotions or they will control your decisions. I've always said, don't major in minor things. That's especially true when you're in a storm. Some people lose their focus over small criticisms, over what someone said or what they think someone meant. All that noise becomes a distraction from the goal. When things get tough, that's not the time to look around. It's the time to look within. And what builds that kind of inner strength? It's what you do daily, not just in the crisis. Resilience is not built in the storm. It's revealed in the storm. It's built in the quiet hours, in the way you speak to yourself, in the habits you form, in the company you keep. And if you spend your days complaining, surrounding yourself with doubters, feeding your mind with fear and scarcity, don't be surprised when a little pressure turns your whole world upside down. But if you invest in yourself, if you train your mind to see problems as puzzles and setbacks as setup, then no matter what happens, you'll remain. That's the difference between those who wish for success and those who will it into existence. One gets discouraged at the first sign of resistance. The other keeps going until resistance becomes routine. I remember meeting a young man who had failed twice in business before the age of 30. He said, "I guess I'm just not cut out for this." I told him, "Son, failure isn't a sign you're not cut out. It's the process of being carved into the person you're meant to be." That clicked for him. A few years later, he was running a company 3 times bigger than anything he had tried before, not because he got lucky, but because he got tough. Mental resilience is about bouncing back, but it's also about bouncing forward. You come back stronger, wiser, sharper. If you go through hardship and learn nothing, you've wasted the pain. But if you grow from it, you've turned a wound into wisdom, and that wisdom compounds. It makes you dangerous in a good way. Because when you've been through the fire and come out standing, there's very little left in this world that can shake you. And let me say this, resilience isn't about doing it all alone. It's about knowing when to reach out, when to recharge, when to refocus. Don't confuse toughness with stubbornness. Even the strongest oak bends with the wind so it doesn't break. Learn to bend when needed, but never bow to defeat. The truth is, if you want wealth, if you want to build a legacy, you better expect the path to get hard. But don't let that discourage you. Let it prepare you. The path is hard because the reward is great. Easy paths lead to empty places, but the hard road, that's where the treasure lies. That's where you are refined. So, how do you train resilience? Wake up every morning and remind yourself of your reasons. Why are you doing this? Who are you doing it for? What kind of life do you want to live? Keep that picture in front of you. And then build discipline. Do something difficult every day, not because you have to, but because you choose to. Train your will like a muscle. Because when the day comes that life tries to knock you down, you'll have the strength to stand tall. And above all, never let temporary defeat become permanent identity. You are not your failure. You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are your possibility. So hold your head up, straighten your back, speak life, and keep walking, because the mind that refuses to be broken becomes the man the world can't ignore. You see, the mind is always listening. It doesn't argue. It accepts what you say and goes to work to make it real. Say, I'm no good at this, and your mind says, understood, I'll make sure we stay that way. Say, I always mess things up, and your brain says, all right, I'll keep you consistent with that identity. Now say, I am capable, and your mind starts filtering reality to find the proof. That's how powerful self-talk is. It shapes not only your perception, but your results. I used to think confidence was a mystery, something people were born with, but I learned often the hard way that confidence is crafted by conversation, and the most important conversation is the one you have with yourself. You can't plant weeds in the garden of your mind and expect a harvest of flowers. You've got to be intentional. You've got to become your own coach, not your worst critic. When I was starting out, I didn't have a winning record. I had lost money, lost confidence, and lost time. And let me tell you, the voice in my head wasn't always kind. But one day I realized I would never say these things to a friend. Why then would I speak them over my own life? That's when I began changing my language. Not with empty hype, but with intentional direction. Instead of, I'll never make it, I started saying, I'm learning how. Instead of, I always fail, I said, that was a lesson, and now I'm wiser. The language shifted, and so did my identity. And as the identity changed, the results followed. That's the pattern. You can't outperform your internal dialogue for very long. Eventually, the outer world reflects the inner script. Even Scripture teaches us, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That doesn't just apply to thoughts. It applies to the words we repeatedly speak to ourselves. Words have weight, they carry direction, they assign meaning, and when spoken enough, they become beliefs, and beliefs are what determine the altitude of your life. I met a man once who told me he was cursed. I asked him why he thought that. He said, well, nothing I try ever works out. I asked, how often do you say that to yourself? He said, all the time. I told him, that's not a curse, sir. That's a pattern of belief, reinforced by repetition. Change the message, and you'll change the outcome. He looked at me like I had handed him the key to a locked door. And in truth, I had. Now, don't confuse this with delusion. I'm not saying you should lie to yourself. I'm saying you should lead yourself. Speak to the potential, not the problem. If your self-talk is all about your current circumstance, you'll stay stuck. But if it's about your future possibility, you'll start to move. Speak from vision. And remember this, your subconscious doesn't know the difference between a joke and a declaration. Say, I'm such an idiot, even in jest, and your subconscious nods and says, got it, idiot behavior coming up. That's why we must guard the gates of the mind. The things we say in passing may be taken seriously by the part of our brain responsible for long-term decisions. What kind of affirmations should you use? Ones grounded in reality and possibility. Say things like, I'm becoming a disciplined person, or I take consistent action toward my goals, or I deserve to succeed because I am putting in the work. These are powerful because they're not lies, they're leadership. They remind your mind where you're going, not where you've been. And it doesn't stop with words, it begins with them. Once you start speaking better, you'll start thinking better, and once you think better, you'll act better. This is the sequence of success. Negative self-talk destroys this flow before it even begins. It puts doubt in place of determination and hesitation where there should be motion. I used to walk around saying, I hope I make it. And let me tell you, that's not a statement of faith, it's a statement of fear. Hope is fine, but it must be anchored in preparation. I replaced I hope with I will. I started waking up and saying, today I will do what is necessary. I will speak well, I will act well, I will live well. And with time, those words became flesh. They became routine, and that routine became results. Even when things go wrong, and they will, I learned to correct the language first. Instead of saying I failed, I'd say, that didn't work out the way I expected. Now what can I learn? That shift saved me more times than I can count. Because self-talk is not just for success, it's for survival. It gets you through dark seasons when applause is scarce and progress is invisible. One of the greatest things you can ever do for yourself is become your own best encourager. Be the voice that says, you can, when everything around you whispers, you can't. Because here's what I know. The voices on the outside will never be louder than the voice you believe on the inside. Make sure that voice is working for you, not against you. Practice it every morning, every night. Stand in front of the mirror if you have to. Speak out loud the kind of person you are becoming, not the one you used to be, the one you're building. Say it with belief, say it with clarity, say it until your behavior starts to catch up to your words, and it will. You don't get the life you want, you get the life you believe you deserve. And belief is shaped by what you repeatedly say. Let your self-talk be a mirror of your potential, not your past. Speak as though your future depends on it. Because in many ways it does. What you say to yourself matters more than you've ever imagined. Let it be powerful, let it be purposeful, and let it be the fuel that carries you from average to exceptional. Because when the voice inside you becomes stronger than the noise outside you, you've already won the battle. You don't decide your future, you decide your habits, and your habits decide your future. That's the equation. And once I figured that out, everything changed. I stopped chasing results and started shaping routines. You see, success doesn't show up in a day. It shows up in the accumulation of disciplined decisions made day after day, often in silence, often without applause. Most people want success to feel exciting, loud, dramatic, but success is quiet. It's a whisper, not a scream. It's in the early morning when you choose to rise before the sun. It's in the moment you sit down to read for 30 minutes instead of scrolling your life away. It's in saying no to what's convenient and yes to what's necessary. When I was a broke, struggling man, I used to look at wealthy people and wonder what secret they had. Turns out they had none, just habits. I met a millionaire once who told me, "What I do daily is boring to most, but it builds my empire." That line stuck with me because it's true. Success is built on the back of ordinary things done extraordinarily well. So I started small. I built a habit of reading 10 pages a day. Doesn't sound like much, but over a year, that's 3,650 pages. That's like 10 to 15 books, and every one of them gave me something, a strategy, an insight, a perspective. That habit alone changed my direction. I began feeding my mind like I fed my body, regularly and with intention. Next, I worked on consistency. Consistency is what separates amateurs from professionals. Anyone can be disciplined for a day, but discipline that repeats itself becomes identity. And once you see yourself as a disciplined person, you start doing what disciplined people do, even when you don't feel like it. That's the magic of habits. They automate success. For years, I made it a rule never to go to bed without writing down my top 3 priorities for the next day. That one act gave me focus. And focus, when maintained over time, becomes momentum. The average person starts the day reacting. Emails, texts, noise. But those who win the day start with clarity. That's a habit. And clarity compounds. Habits are like seeds. You won't see the tree tomorrow, but if you water it, feed it, protect it, one day you'll sit in its shade. Most people are impatient. They plan a habit, and if they don't see results in a week, they dig it up and say it didn't work. But the successful know results are always late to the party, but they come bearing gifts. And let me say this, your habits must be aligned with your values. If you say you value health, but your habit is eating poorly, that contradiction creates stress. If you say you value wealth, but you habitually waste time, you're out of alignment. Habits are the proof of your true beliefs. If you want to change your life, don't just set goals, install habits that support them. There's a story I love about the great sculptor Michelangelo. When asked how he created the statue of David, he said, "I simply removed everything that wasn't David." That's what habits do. They chip away at who you're not until what's left is exactly who you were meant to be. But you've got to show up every day with the chisel. A habit I still recommend to everyone is reflection. 5 minutes a day, ask yourself, what did I do well today? What could I have done better? Where did I waste time? Where did I make progress? Success isn't just doing, it's learning from what you do. Without reflection, you repeat mistakes. With reflection, you refine performance. Now, habits aren't always glamorous. Some days you'll feel like skipping, but that's the test. Successful people don't build their lives on how they feel. They build on what they've decided. Emotion is a poor master, but discipline will never lie to you. It will reward you in the end. When I started in business, I set a habit of making 10 phone calls a day. Most of them led nowhere, but over time, one call opened a door, then another. Eventually, those calls led to connections, which led to sales, which led to success. You don't need 1,000 things. You need a few powerful habits, repeated relentlessly. One of my favorite reminders came from an old friend. He said, "Don't just work hard, work habitually." Anyone can work hard for a weekend, but if you can discipline yourself to show up daily, even when no one is watching, that's when success starts to chase you. It doesn't run to the fastest, it runs to the most consistent. Habits are your silent partners. They either work for you or against you. The habit of saving money builds wealth. The habit of wasting it builds worry. The habit of reading builds intelligence. The habit of ignoring truth builds ignorance. You don't escape your habits, you embody them. That's why I say, audit your days. Ask yourself, what am I doing consistently that is building my dream? And what am I doing that's quietly destroying it? You can't lie to your calendar. You can't fake your routines. The scoreboard of life reflects what you practice, not what you promise. There's one more truth I've discovered. Your life will rise or fall to the level of your habits, not your goals, not your wishes, your habits. They are the roots. And if the roots are deep, the tree can weather any storm. And so I encourage you, begin today, choose one success habit, just one. Practice it daily, like brushing your teeth. Don't wait for motivation, it's unreliable. Use commitment instead. Let the habit carry you forward when emotion wants to pull you back. Because here's the promise. If you build the right habits, you won't have to chase success, it will find you. Because it always finds the one who is ready.